It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm so glad to be out here. First thing I want to talk about is our internship. So first off, guys, I understand where you're at. I have sat where you sat, only a few times in this building, but in the other campus. It's been a minute since I was here. Dr. Howell was actually his first year teaching. Professor Phillips, as you call him now, was just a student with me. So it's been a minute. I'm also going to show you a quick picture of my family, because whenever I had chapels, people would show pictures of their families. And so I heard, that's a thing that you should do. I don't really know why else. But actually, my big kids on the side, Grace, Luke, Liam, my wife, Robert Joe, my big kids have been here for summer camps. They've done stuff with teams. They came for... We called it Nerd Camp. I believe it was esports camp. Don't tell them. And so my big kids actually wanted me to say hi to a few of you as well, because they were very excited. So I don't know these people, but I was told to say hi to Rachel Horn. My daughter said that you slayed at National Fine Arts, and also that I wouldn't say slayed while I was on the pulpit, but she's wrong. I did. Lindsay, who went to Guatemala, you're supposed to come back with us this year to Guatemala. Genesis, you're supposed to just come back in general rather than continually ghosting us. But whatever. And Laser. And then there was Laser's girlfriend who didn't get a name at first. And I was like, guys, are you sure you want me to just name someone by position? So they came up with a name. And there was another Rachel, and there was a lot more people. But my kids say hey to everybody. What I'm here for, first off, was I was here to come talk about an internship. So we've got 2 summer ministry internship positions at Crossroads. I'm looking for 2 people who would like to dive headfirst into ministry in as much as they possibly can, doing everything that we do. In fact, before I talk more about it, I want to show you a quick video so that you could take a little look at what Crossroads is like and just get a little sense of it. So I'd like to have 2 people come spend the summer with me to participate in things like our weekend services, platform ministry, kids camp, VBS, maybe a trip to fine arts, maybe a missions trip, whatever kind of ministry opportunities work best for you. If you have musical skills, music, but if not, then don't do that. If you're interested in kids, youth, if you like tech and media, we've got plenty. We're actually a multi-site, so we broadcast from one location to the other. We've got lots and lots of volunteer teams that need leaders, and there's a fairly strong amount of planning and strategizing that goes into it, and we are always trying to develop relationships with the next generation of leaders. And if we happen to train you in some small way for your future ministry, and if we've made the kingdom stronger as a whole, then that's a successful summer. I know that there are some official internship requirements. I'll do my best to help with those. I have no idea how that works. I have no authority over that whatsoever. But if you spend the summer with us, I'll do my best to make that work for you. I've got a house It's actually a really nice house from a family who spends most of their time in Cape Cod. 2 separate bedrooms, but they will be next to each other. And there's lots more opportunities. If you're interested or just have some general questions, let's talk at lunch. Come find me. Or if you won't believe me, you can ask Mitch, and he'll tell you the real truth about what things are like at Crossroads. There's also a website. I hate to call it like an application, like apply, but there's a form for interest that you can catch at our website. I'll give it to you, but it's mycc.church/summer-internship. I know it's kind of long, but at least it's fairly self-explanatory. Any other questions? Let's talk more while we're there. All right, if you've got a Bible, we're heading to Luke 6. While you go there, let me tell you guys a story. So the neighborhood that I live close to is a fairly nondescript, pretty regular neighborhood. I drive to work through it, several times a day. There's a little bit higher than average number of children there. The roads are in decent conditions. It's kind of suburban. When the realtor tried to sell us on it, I got pitches like, you could start your family here, ideal homes, these kinds of things. On the surface, it looks real good. In fact, if you take a quick picture, I'll show you a small part of my neighborhood. On the surface, everything looks real normal. My house isn't actually in that picture because I didn't trust you guys that far. But the problem is there's something a little bit deeper going on under the surface of every single house in this neighborhood. Every single house in this neighborhood has a crumbling foundation. If anyone is from Connecticut, or if you happen to read news for random reasons, like you guys might do, there's actually a foundation problem in Connecticut. There was this company, they poured up to 35,000 houses, all of which have a defect in the foundation. So of that picture I showed you, every one of those houses has a bad foundation. Every one of those has had the work done. And my house is not that far. I think I'm in the clear, but I'm not 100% sure I'm in the clear. Sometimes people want to show us a certain perspective, making everything look like it's fine on the outside. Sometimes we get a deeper look. Sometimes we get a deeper understanding. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we don't really know what foundations are like or what they're made of until it's time to see if they're going to be solid, if they're going to be reliable or dependable, if they're going to make it through. So in the Gospels, in the time of Jesus, he's dealing with a people whose foundation for the most part has failed them. Most of what they've expected, most of what they've based their life on, most of their religious understanding and their practice was going to lead them towards success, towards being a power. And they're a conquered people. There are people who are struggling with the fact that the foundations of understanding that we had have not come through. There's a failure here. There's a weakness. And so as Jesus is talking to these people, he's in an area of the world where their understanding has collapsed quite recently. And in fact, he deals with his disciples and Pharisees and people all trying to understand what does life look like, figuring out this foundation. Have you ever thought that you knew how something was going to go, only to be real disappointed? So for example, maybe you're heading to a test and you're like, yeah, I got this all figured out. And you get the grade and it's real disappointing. It's definitely not what you thought that it was going to be. There's something that kind of takes the wind out of your sails in those situations where you think you know how something is going to go, but it lets you down. It's different to just be unsure. It's different to think, oh yeah, who knows, here goes the best. But when you have an expectation of things going well and it goes poorly, it's that much harder to deal with. And so these people that Jesus is talking to have had an entire life, for most of them, of this failure of foundation. And so Jesus comes to talk to people who thought they knew what life was going to look like, who thought they had understood what was needed, what was expected, what kind of outcomes they were going to have, but it wasn't. It didn't go that way. I wish I had more time to walk through all of Luke chapter 6. It's an amazing chapter. The way the different stories contrast, there's really like a higher narrative that I would love to spend time going through, but we don't have time for that. I'm going to tell you guys one of my favorite stories of my time that I was here. I think that it was a campus experience, and there was a preach-a-thon. The year when everyone comes back, there was the alumni weekend, and they were doing a preach-a-thon, and there was a screen just like this, and someone kept saying, if I had the time, I would tell you about, and then he proceeded to tell you about it, and the media team actually changed the title on his name to, If I Had the Time, Smith. I thought it was funny. It didn't go great. But I don't actually have the time to jump into all the preceding stuff of Luke chapter 6. But as we caught the scriptures, we're in verse 46. And verse 46 says this, so why do you keep calling me Lord, Lord, when you don't do what I say? Right, so Jesus has jumped into that kind of that pre-understanding. Hey, I've given you understandings. I've given you teachings. I've given you things that need to be done. But what you're doing is simply paying lip service. You're calling me Lord, Lord. You're acting like you're on board, but you're not actually doing these things. You're not actually going along. We're going to talk about your foundation. Your foundation in life, it's your spiritual formation, it's your spiritual foundation, it's your expectations, it's what you've built upon, what you're building upon. These kinds of foundation. You know, we're actually in February 1st, and aside from being the first day of Black History Month, I think this is the first day that everyone can give up on their New Year's resolutions. This is a day like, you're officially clear, I can cut those things loose. The cool thing about January is we naturally kind of evaluate things. We as people have a way to naturally look at what is working or what isn't working, and we kind of take some stock and see, should I make some changes? At the very least, we recognize I probably ought to make a change here, even if we don't actually get to the change. When it comes to the foundations of our life, sometimes there are changes that need to be made. It's not always so hard to recognize the fact that the change needs to be made, but it can be a very different task to actually make the change, to actually do some work on the foundation. And what Jesus is giving us is he's featuring a foundation. He's giving us a foundation that you can look at, that you can talk about, that you can be aware of. And he says in verse 47, I will show you what it's like when someone comes to me, listens to my teaching, and then follows it. That progression there is not just, hey, if you come to me, if you come to Bible college, if you come to class, if you show up, then that's it. You've got the foundation. Jesus continues, says, listens, hears, right? We should be familiar with that difference of listening and hearing and really understanding, and then follows it, and then puts it into practice. So Jesus isn't just showing us like a quick demonstration. He's really talking about an entire lifetime, and he's utilizing his life and ideally the life of his followers to be that example. So when he's talking about showing, he's talking about, yes, I want to explain, I want to give examples and understanding and walk it out, but I also want you to be able to look at it and see. When you're looking at a foundation of a house, the foundation of a house is very obvious. It's actually very hard to miss. That's why they're right there on the side. You can see it. And so sometimes we're tempted to think that like our personal foundations aren't super visible, but really they are. Really, the people who look at us, who sit next to us, look at our foundation and are able to see a lot of what we're basing our lives on. And Jesus wants to show those people at that time a comparison to the foundation that they have and a foundation that he is offering to them, a foundation that he wants them to help to build and demonstrate for someone who comes, listens, and follows. Verse 48, it is like a person building a house who digs deep and lays the foundation on solid rock. When the flood water rise and break against that house, it stands firm because it is well built. Well-built foundation, well-built life is not easy, and it's not the default. It's not the thing that's going to happen accidentally. We don't end up with strong foundation because of good intention. We don't end up with strong foundation because people around us have strong foundations. Strong foundations only come through effort. And so as Jesus begins to show, what he does in this section is he says, let me also give a warning against those who are going to miss this. So then verse 49, but anyone who hears and doesn't obey is like a person who builds a house right on the ground without a foundation. When the floods sweep down against that house, it will collapse into a heap of ruins. Okay, for a second, think about that picture of the neighborhood I showed you of all those houses. At the time that those houses were being built, no one thought there was something wrong with them. No one thought that there was a flaw in the plan or the foundation. No one thought that there was a mistake. When people build the foundations of their life on whatever it is, rarely does someone think, hey, I'm going to just hope for the best here, but I know this really isn't a very good idea. We choose things that make sense, that seem like good ideas. We think things that are like the conventional wisdom, the wisdom of the day. No one is looking for a bad idea. And oftentimes, the failures, the shortcomings, the issues there aren't immediately visible. It takes a long time for a life foundation to really begin to show its weakness. It turns out that those houses in particular were fine for decades. They changed hands numerous times. No one thought that there was any problem with the foundation for many years. If you grew up as a kid in church, and you're also a little bit older than most of you are here, we had this thing called flannelgrams back in the day. They used to give us like these cutout things on flannel, and if you wore a flannel shirt, it would stick to you. And I have like clear memory of this story of the foundations. And what was shown was this one house. It was like this amazing rocky outcropping, like mini fortress. And it's like, look, see how the waves are fine. And then there was this other ridiculous house that was basically like built on the beach next to the water that had no chance to survive because it was foolish. Rarely would anyone try to sell you a foundation like that. Rarely would they say, this is a terrible idea. This will certainly not work. You should build your life here. Rather, they think this is a good foundation. This is good ground. This is a good idea. This is something that you can rely upon or trust upon. I'm going to show you another house. This house is on Rodanthe on the beach. It's in South Carolina, and that's really where it's built. I know I said, like, who would do that? Well, I guess these geniuses thought that this was a great place to build this house. It is right here on the beach. I'm going to call this house a bit of a fantasy foundation, and you'll see in a second. But again, I'm sure that the people who built this house, there were engineers. There were people who knew how to build foundations. I'm sure they calculated all kinds of things that I can't even imagine, like sand, strength, depth of foundation, water and erosion, and yada, 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 yada. I'm sure that when they were selling this idea, this is such a great idea. You can put your life on this, and it will be fine. You can rely on this foundation, and you will get through just fine. If we aren't really being circumspect, if we aren't really looking at our lives, the default is this is fine. What you're doing is fine. What you're trying is going to work out just fine. We do it all the time. We look at other people and think, well, what are their goals for life? How are they building a marriage, a family? What are they doing for money? We look at these things and think, hey, you know what? I've got a foundation here that it will match the needs of my life. This is sufficient. But when Jesus is talking to these people, he's speaking to ones who are saying, yeah, I can handle it. But the reality is that they can't. I'm going to show you a quick YouTube video from that very same beach that we just looked at a moment ago. So this is Rodanthe Beach in South Carolina, fast forwarding just a couple of years from the time of that picture. It's not just one house, it's actually all the houses. They're all collapsing into the ocean, especially the ones where people couldn't afford to move them. What seemed like a great idea just a few years ago, what was certainly something I could base my life on just a couple of years ago, turned out to be an absolute disaster shortly thereafter. There's good news and there's bad news. There's a possibility of foundation repair. There's an opportunity to work on the foundations of our life. The purpose of the foundation is that it would bear weight. The purpose is that everything we put upon it would be able to hold it. And so for you here who right now find yourselves in a season of preparation for ministry, for life, for what comes in the future, you're building a foundation right now. You are every single day working on the foundation. If we were going to be real honest, your foundation is probably stronger than an awful lot of people. But the thing is, the stuff that you're going to build on that foundation is going to require a lot more than most people. You guys are going to find yourself in ministries, in opportunities, in situations of character that are going to go far beyond what most people are going to encounter. And so you need a foundation in your life that isn't the average, isn't slightly better than normal, if you look at that guy, I'm in great shape. That's not the life that you've signed up for. That's not the life that you're in training for. The task that you look at is the biggest task in the world. You have the highest calling of following Jesus, and you have already demonstrated a seriousness, a commitment far beyond most people. I believe that you are equal to the task, but that it's not easy, and that it doesn't happen by accident, and it doesn't happen by default. It requires continual life effort. Someone once said, your talent and giftedness as a leader have the potential to take you further than your character can sustain you. And that ought to scare you. I know that this is a talented room of people. I know that there are amazing God-given gifts in this place that can take you very, very far. Many years ago when I was in my spice at the time was development, and we would put out the Vision magazine. And one year what we decided to do was we featured numerous stories of students and what they had walked away from in order to follow the call of God into ministry. We talked about scholarships and chances to play sports professionally. We talked about previous earnings, or especially the older students who'd already had jobs. We went through just a list of things, God-given gifts, talents, and abilities that had been stepped aside to pursue ministry. So I know that there is amazing non-ministry potential in this room. But there are greater calls evident in your life. And so you have to have a foundation that can support that. My greatest benefit of my time being in Bible college was the transformative experience. I got lots of good information. I collected a ton of information. I still have assignments from multiple degrees. I've got all kinds of info. But I can give you information on YouTube. I can give you a lot of great information on YouTube. Transformation is hard to come by. Transformation is hard to allow room in your life for. And transformation is still difficult in an environment like this. But this is a time for transformation far over information. You don't go deeper with God by trying harder. You don't go by intention. You go by training. You don't go by hopes and dreams. You build a foundation over time through effort. Okay, I want to show you one last thing. It's not a picture this time. Hey, this stage is longer than I thought when I started. Okay, this is a Home Depot bucket. It's not super fancy. This is a 5-gallon bucket. Ironically, this was the job I worked as I was finishing up school and for the year after. A 5-gallon Home Depot bucket has just about enough capacity for a bag of concrete. a 50-pound bag of concrete. So if that were full of 50 pounds, but I'm not that strong anymore, so I brought an empty one. If you were to build a regular foundation using bags of concrete or buckets, let's take a regular house, like a 2-3 bedroom, 2-ish bathroom, something that like your grandma had, maybe something that you grew up in. If every bucket is one bag of concrete just to build the foundation, you need 3,500 buckets. 3,500 bags of cement. It is not an easy thing. Every single day, every one of you are filling up this bucket, and you're building your foundation out of it. Whatever you go through your day, you put in that bucket, you are cementing permanently into the foundation. So some of you who are here today, we've started a day with worship, prayer, mediocre preaching. You've poured some of that into a bucket. Some of you are going to go home and be like, well, I don't have enough Netflix in my foundation for today, so I'm definitely going to need that. Some of you have chosen a call to prayer for your bucket. Some of you have chosen a call of duty for your bucket. And whatever it is, it's going to stay there. It's going to become permanent. It's going to become part of your life. And so sometimes we find ourselves in a place where we actually need to do some foundation repair. It's not easy to do foundation repair, but it is necessary. Sometimes we have to go through and we have to chisel out some of our old foundation. We have to break out things that we have made to be a part of our life permanently, because it is not going to leave for you a sustainable foundation. Some of the sand and debris that you put in your life, you cannot build your foundation on. Not if you want to have a life that stands. Not if you want to have a ministry and a future that honors the calling that God has put upon you and that is lived to the fullest potential of what is already in your life. So I want you to think each morning, you've only got one bucket. It's just one bucket a day. You can fill it however you want. You can fill it with whatever thing you do. Here's the thing. One bucket, it's not that big a deal. It's 3,500th. What's the big deal? I want to put some garbage in one bucket today. Who cares? Every day, it's a little bit more foundation in your life. Every day, it's a little bit more permanent. The further down that foundation goes, the longer it takes to repair. Take a quick look at this picture of a foundation repair. What they had to do to these houses, they had to break them off the foundation, lift them into the air, and jackhammer out all of the old concrete. The entire time leaving the house in the air while repouring the foundation around it, they have to cut all the electricity, all the plumbing out, put it back down, and repair it. There's actually, the government has to help pay because no person can afford it. The houses are totaled. It's like a car being totaled. You can't afford it. We can find ourselves in place where our foundations can be a total wreck. We need more help than we can possibly put forward. Now listen, guys, I get this. Every person here, your foundation's built on Jesus. I know your foundation is built on Jesus. The question is Jesus permeating your foundation? Or is he buried under layers of garbage and you forgot that he was down there somewhere? I know he's in there. I'm not questioning that Jesus is the foundation. I'm questioning how much of the foundation is built on Jesus. It's a question that only you know, only you can answer that. But I want you over the next 3 years or 3 months, whatever it might be, listen, I remember vividly, why do we have this? Why do we have that? Why do they want me to go here or not go there? We weren't allowed to see movies. The true story, the head of the Assemblies of God sent a letter telling us to go watch The Passion so that we would support it, because that's how outlawed movies were. All those rules were so ridiculous. We were so mad. I'm 18. I know everything about everything. There were people who were helping me to build a foundation in ways that I didn't even understand. I didn't have any way of comprehending what kinds of foundation stuff I was trying to put in and what that would look like 20 years down the road. I still hang out with a lot of my friends from time here. Some are not in ministry, following Jesus. Some, I'm really going to question how much you're following Jesus. We stood in the same chapels, we prayed the same prayers, we had the same classes, but that's not what gets it done. It's you, and it's your relationship with God, and it's what you allow him to do in your life and in your foundation. Some of that foundation repair is painful. Some of it hurts. Some of it stings. Guys, if I could tell you how many times I had to confess to something to someone who's still sitting in this room. I was in Russia and I had to send an email back. Yes, I threw peanut butter at Brother Culver's cart. I'm sorry. I'll be back in 3 months. Like, I've been there time and time again, and I hate owning my mistakes. I hate people knowing it. I hate telling people. It's part of the process. And it's needed. And those things that seem so insignificant today, that foundation's probably fine. Decades later, it'll lead to success or it'll lead to failure. I'm going to ask you guys if you'd stand up with me. I want to pray for you, and we're going to take a minute to allow some prayer time together if you would like. Lord Jesus, thank you for every person who you have brought into this room. God, you know their callings and their purpose. You know what they have in store for their lives down the road. God, we believe that you have called them to your purposes, which are great purposes. I know that you have and are continuing to equip them. Lord, would you help us to allow you to do the work? God, would you help me to get out of the way of what you are doing in my life, of what your plans and your purpose, of the foundation that you can instill. Help us, Jesus, to make room for you. God, help us not to value other things more than you and your plans. God, help us not to fear the future or what might be in store down the road. God, we trust that you know what is best, even when we don't know where we're going. God, help us to allow your Spirit to work in our lives. Help us not to fight against what you are doing and where you are going. Lord, I ask that you would bless this group right here. God, that you would bless their ministries that they are involved in now, that you would bless their studies. God, I ask that you would bless them as they plan for summer and next year and the future of following after you. Lord, would you instill peace and confidence in your plan? God, as we stand in the center of your will, there is nowhere safer that we could be, even if we don't know what next steps are. God, I ask that you would continue to use these students, to use their lives. And Lord, I ask that you would be with them. Jesus, we ask it in your name. Northpoint, if you'd like to take a moment and find a place of prayer, if you could use the altars at your seats, I would be delighted to pray for you and take these last couple of minutes to allow God to speak to you in the way that he would.